Hello and welcome to Defence Line, our weekly program on defence, security and more. Though the mainstay of a country's defence, especially its offensive capability, are its mechanized forces, India has been struggling for having its own main battle tank for nearly 30 to 40 years. How good is our current MBT Arjun? How does it compare with the other tanks in our fleet like the T-90S? Which of these tanks would measure up to our requirements of the future? These are some of the issues we'll discuss with Brigadier Bikramjit Singh, who commanded an armoured brigade, Major General Raj Mehta, who has been associated with the MBT project at different stages, and Major General B.S. Garewal, former GOC of an armoured division. Gentlemen, welcome to the discussion. But before that, let us look at this report.
The armour deficit identified during the 1971 war led to the need of an indigenously built main battle tank. Subsequently, in 1972, the Defence Research and Development Organisation began the development of the MBT. The tank was meant to supplement and eventually replace the Soviet-era T-72 MBT. The DRDO was to complete the project in 1984, but it could develop the first prototype in 1982. Another 13 years and the tank was publicly unveiled for the first time in 1995. And after almost another decade, the first Arjun tank was inducted into the Indian Army in 2004. That too after it had already cost the exchequer a whopping 3.5 billion rupees. The cost overrun was almost 20 times the original estimate. Originally meant to be a 40-ton tank with a 105 mm gun, the Arjun now has grown to a 60-ton tank with a 120 mm rifled gun. It boasts of an indigenously developed APF-STS ammunition, a 7.62 mm coaxial machine gun and a 12.7 mm machine gun. The Arjun is powered by a single MTU multi-fuel diesel engine rated at 1400 horsepower and can achieve a maximum speed of 70 km per hour. Finally, almost 4 decades it was conceived. The Indian Army got its first armoured tank regiment with 45 Arjun tanks inducted into the 43rd Armoured Regiment in 2009. However, the journey for Arjun hasn't been so easy. It was only after a comparative trial with the T-90 tanks that the Army placed an order for another 124 Arjun tanks. This, as the delays prompted India to order 310 T-90s and an upgraded version of the T-72 in 2001. The tank has also come under fire for having 58% of its imported content. Also, a section holds the view that the Arjun has limited utility in desert and can be best remain in service for a limited period.
We are in conversation with 3 retired Armoured Corps officers. General Mehta, I'll start with you. We all know that the MBT Arjun took a long time in coming. So who is to blame for the delay? The user, which is the Army or the MOD or the DRDO?
All the players.
How do you say that?
I would be very blunt in saying that, in the sense that the DRDO took an unfortunate excess of time. The Army kept changing its parameters depending upon who were reading which glossy magazine. And the indigenous component or the content which could have been enhanced by using private industry were not even touched, not even with a barge pole. The government did not really have an ombudsman to take care of the glitches that were taking place and the changes that were taking place. Nobody really sat on the same table with the same intent and the same mind as is being done in so many countries.
But I think the Army is primarily to blame. The Army changed the GSQR at least twice in the 80s.
In fact, that is right. Overall, the GSQR was changed 3 times. But the fact also is that the DRDO at that stage promised the moon. Secondly, the government policy existing since the last 30 years was that if you wish to import, DRDO clearance must be taken that they can't produce indigenously. And when you promise the moon and you cannot produce very much to begin with, then obviously you put a spanner in the works which upsets everybody and everything.
General Mehta, you've been associated with the project at different stages. You've written about it. What do you think of the final product? Is it something to be really proud of?
I think it has huge potential, Mr. Sandhu. The fact that in recent months it has excelled and in what I consider an unfair trial, it has supposedly beaten the T-90. And with certain constraints and restrictions with reference to its mobility, I think it is a world-class tank.
Brigadier Bikramjit Singh, as General Raj Mehta says, that it has the potential of being a world-class tank. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
As a tank commander, would you be comfortable going to battle in MBT Arjun?
No, totally I will agree with Raj. Not only it has the potential, it is in fact one of the better tanks in the world today. Only thing is, when initially it was introduced, it was with one particular sector in mind, the desert sector. That is why its configuration, the weight, part-weight ratio, and other aspects are suited to that. And no trials, asphalt trials, have been carried out in the developed terrain. Neither in infrastructure in terms of rail movement, tar truss to lift it,
Well said.
or the bridges in the canal terrain have been catered for. Now they are being catered for and being developed.
Okay.
So therefore, to be able to adjust from one sector to another sector is altogether a different ball game.
I believe MBT Arjun was first introduced in 43 Armoured. That's your regiment. So what tank did 43 Armoured have before this?
Before the tanks came up for trials to us in 1992, we were equipped to Vijanta tanks. It was a decision taken at the Army headquarters that one of the Vijanta regiments will be replaced with Arjun first. And out of the 16 regiment, they shortlisted 2, and I was asked at that time, commanding officer, would I be able to take on the trials of the Arjun tank, which I willingly took over, and spent half my tenure doing nothing but trials. And having seen from that stage what it is now today, it is a quantum jump.
So how did the tank crew react when they moved from the Vijayants to the Arjun? Were they happy? Were they disappointed?
No, there is Jameen Asman ka farak, day and night, between Vijayant and Arjun.
Okay.
There is no comparison. So anyone will close his eyes and go towards the Arjun when you talk of between the Vijayant and the Arjun.
General Garwal, you commanded an armoured division. So what is the general feeling in the armoured regiments about the MBT Arjun?
At the outset, I want to say that I did not have Arjuns as a part of my formation as a brigade commander or as a divisional commander.
That must have been the talking point in the armoured division.
But you see, to get this, there's a historical perspective to this whole thing. And that historical perspective is the experience of the Armoured Corps with the Vijayant. The Vijayant was something which had been developed as an Indian tank, a copy of the Vickers. Now the kind of problems we had with the Vijayant during its entire service, it led to a certain trust deficit between what we think our people can do for us.
Okay.
So I think the basic problem that existed amongst various armoured regiments was the kind of faith deficit. Will the Arjun measure up? And that is why I think the Arjun was looked at with a certain degree of skepticism in the initial stages of the trials. From the point of view of its capabilities, it is undoubtedly a world-class tank today, and it should measure up with the best tanks of its class anywhere in the world.
General Garwal, there is a feeling that due to its heavy weight, it's almost 60 tons, this tank is primarily a tank for the deserts. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, yes and no. You see, yes, the tank is very good for the desert because it doesn't have those kind of mobility related problems in the desert which it would have in developed terrain. Weight per se does not make a tank fit or unfit for any particular type of terrain. You know, we must look at a tank as not just an isolated piece of equipment in the battlefield. We have to look at it in the overall perspective of how does the tank fit into the logistics chain, the mobility chain. Sadly, the Arjun doesn't fit into that in certain types of terrain as of today.
So very well put. I think that's why the trust deficit still exists. General Mehta,
I would like to reiterate some of the fine points Bobby has made. The first issue is that today, after over 33 years of hard work, all we have is 2 regiments of the Arjun tank, which means that over 95% of the Armoured Corps remains skeptical, with just 2 regiments who are banking upon this tank because they have lived with it, as Bikram has very nicely brought up. That's point 1. Point 2, logistics actually dictates success in operations. So when you talk of rail transportation difficult, air transportation not possible, bridge classification on the highways to be minimum class 70, which is currently available only on the national highway system. Now the border is not really served by the national highway system. So when you wish to induct the tank, let's say in the mountain, where there is a fourth core, or anywhere in developed terrain, you're going to have a problem. Added to that is the fact that when you look at the Merkava and you look at the Abrams, which are, and the lead clerk, which are the
Abrams is the US tank, Merkava the Israeli tank?
Right. They are in the same weight class, 60 to 62 tons of this tank. The point at issue is, does it have an armored recovery vehicle which can lug a load of 63 tons? No. Does it have an armored personnel carrier that will be able to go with it? No. Does it have logistics backup that can travel with it? No. Does it have...
Let me just get a bit concrete into the conversation. How do you react to the trust deficit that still exists because of the problems that Raj Mehta has listed out?
Bobby and Raj have very rightly brought out certain issues, but I will amplify them a little bit. The first is trust deficit is why? Because of the maintainability of the equipment. And maintainability accrues from what? Availability of the spares. As of today, there is no engineer support plan existing for Arjun tank. Because that can exist only if the numbers increase.
Okay.
Now, whenever you buy a car, a list of spares is available. Its provisioning is there as to what frequency to be changed. So policy is laid down for any equipment that is introduced in the army. Unfortunately for Arjun, it has not been done till date.
Moving on to another aspect, General Mehta, there is a feeling that when the work on Project Arjun was still on, India went in for the purchase of T-90s. A lot of people feel that is primarily to scuttle the MBT project. What do you say?
In fact, I think the more balanced view would be, I've heard this view, but I don't quite agree with it. Perhaps the more balanced view would be that at that moment, Arjun had not been delivered. Arjun was promised for delivery in 84, it was 90, it was 2000, it hadn't been delivered. In the meanwhile, Pakistan had graduated from Patton tanks which it had retired, as we had retired the Centurion, to high-grade tanks. They had got on to the T-80 UD. Now, how was India going to contest a resurgent Pakistan that was doing up its armored corps in a real rapid and effective way? Since Arjun was not delivering, was not on schedule, there was no choice but to look around for it.
So it was the need of the hour at that point.
Perhaps. I mean, the T-90 is just a name, it could well have been TX, TY, TZ. The fact is that a ready country that was prepared to sell along with maintainability spares, for which the Russians are very well known throughout the world. I was laughingly talking to somebody whom I met on a train journey from an Arjun regiment.
Okay.
And he turned around and said, sir, today's situation is that if you need item X, Y and Z which should have been available in the workshop, you're told kindly come to Chennai to the factory and collect it from there. Now that kind of situation not really war effectiveness.
I'll just come back to you. Time for a short break here. When we return, we continue our discussion on our mechanized capability.